On pages 4 and 5, there are a number of experiments looking at some of the different forces that we might come across in physics. And this was a series of experiments that we were doing in class and recording our observations, as I said, in the spaces in pages 4 and 5. The first experiment was looking very briefly at magnets. And we have these two things, which are bar magnets. And it said, first of all, hold two bar magnets, one in each hand, and bring the two ends together. We can see when I bring them together, they were attracted to one another. There was a pulling force. Secondly, what happened when we brought the other ends together? So turn them both around. And again, you can see that they're pulled together. Finally, what happens if we turn one of the magnets round and bring the two ends together? We can see this time there's a pushing force. They're being repelled. So, bring the two ends together, they pull together. Other ends also pull together, and turn one around, and they pushed apart from one another. The second experiment was looking at something called electric forces, which seems surprising because what we were using were some strips of plastic, it mentions a ruler in your notes, but using plastic, and rubbing it on your sleeve, or a duster in this case. So here I've got some little bits of paper, just small bits of paper torn up. It says rub a plastic ruler in your sleeve and hold it above some small scraps of paper. So if we get the cloth to rub, and hold it above the paper, we can see that the bits of paper lift off the table and are attracted towards the plastic ruler. So again, there's a pulling force involved. Then you're asked to see what happens when you hold your rubbed ruler close to a gentle stream of water. You should be able to see that the water is bending. And it is attracted towards the plastic rod. So there's a pulling force there. Finally, you're asked to see what happens whenever you held the rubbed ruler with a bit of string and bring it close to another rubbed one. Instead of suspending it in string, we balanced them on upturned evaporating basins so that they would be able to spin around if they were touched. So I'm going to rub this. I'm going to rub this. And let's see what happens if we bring them close together. You can see that they're pushing apart from one another. They're repelling. They don't have to be in contact with one another. They can apply a force from a distance, a bit like magnets. For the third experiment, you were given a table tennis ball and asked to consider its motion when you did three things. When you threw it up in the air, when you threw it horizontally, and when you dropped it. So let's think about what happens there. So when we threw it up, it went up, slowed down, and came back down again, speeding up. So there was a force pulling it downwards. When we threw it sideways, it kept going sideways, but it also curved downwards. So again, a force started to pull it downwards. And finally, when we simply dropped it, well, obviously it just fell, showing that there's a force pulling downwards, which is gravity. The fourth experiment, you were given a block of wood and a sheet of sandpaper, and asked to see what happens when you slide this across the desk and then slide it across a bit of sandpaper. So first of all, across the desk, I'm going to give it a flick. We saw it skidded quite a long way across the desk, but it did slow down and come to a stop. So it started quickly, moved across, and slowed down. Let's look at that again. What happens if we do it on a bit of sandpaper? Right there, hold the sandpaper in place, give it a flick. We saw it skids, but it comes to stop much more quickly. And this is looking at the idea of friction. This is a more friction surface, higher friction surface, and so it'll lose speed much more quickly. Don't forget, in all these things, we're looking at what can a force do to an object. We see that it can speed it up or slow it down, cause it to move. We can cause something to change direction, and it can change the shape of an object. Make sure that you record these results on your pages.